From crease to crease and corner to corner, Bettor Hockey Now is NHL fantasy and betting done better. Step into the dot for Bettor Hockey Now on the Bettor Sports Network.
Welcome into the debut edition of Bettor Hockey Now here on the Bettor Sports Network, kicking things off for the 2023 Stanley Cup Finals. I'm Adam Bernard, and my line mates for today and for the foreseeable future are Mr. Anthony Rivera and Mr. Christopher Morais of FantasyAlarm.com. Fellas, hockey's a cold weather sport, but the best hockey of the year comes when it gets nice and warm out. And here we are. It's June 1st, and we get the Stanley Cup kicking off in a couple of days.
Yeah, I got the speaking of it being hot, so I'm in my little office studio. I don't got an air conditioner, but it's super hot upstairs. So I got a little fan going on. I can't believe we're talking about hockey and I have to have this fan on right now while we're doing all this.
It's getting a little warm in here for me too. How are things up in Montreal, Chris?
The weather is beautiful here. It is also scorching hot. Two ACs running, trying to keep everything intact. But I think it's also fitting that it's hot, and we're talking about two climates that are going to go battle where you cannot naturally grow ice at all. Vegas is not. It is extremely hot all year round there, and Florida as well. So it's kind of fitting.
Got Anthony on the East Coast, me on the West Coast, you up north, and two teams in the Sun Belt down south for this year's Stanley Cup Finals. The Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights will go through their roads to the Stanley Cup Finals in just a second here. But before we do that, initial impressions of the runs that Florida and Vegas have had so far. Let's start with you, Anthony. Florida has been unbelievable so far, especially in that Carolina series. They're winning a ton in overtime. Going back to that Boston series from Game 5 on, what have you noticed different about them?
Well, it's got to be the Bob, right? Bobrovsky's been just unreal, has really turned Florida around for the better and has launched them all the way to the Stanley Cup. The sweep of the Canes was pretty surprising to me. I thought it would have at least gone 6, and then they took care of Toronto. And yeah, only probably Toronto fans thought that they, had the chance to turn this around. And even some didn't think it was possible because they could never get out of the first round. But yeah, Florida has looked awesome. And, you talk about Bobrovsky, talk about Tkachuk. I mean, they have a nice team set for this Stanley Cup final. And I really do think they have a really good chance of, taking it all.
And Chris, when you look at Vegas's path here so far, what jumps out at you?
I'm going to be honest, I did not have Vegas going very far. I didn't think they were going to get out of the first round, but they basically just handled the Jets from start to finish, with the exception of maybe one game and a period that they gave up a lead. They were just fantastic from start, right? And it doesn't matter who starts from them. Laurent Brossoit starts, gets hurt against Edmonton. Adin Hill steps in like he hasn't missed a beat. I didn't think they were going to be able to slow down Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl because they are not human. They do things that no other player can do. Their power play as well was operating at above 50%. So it seemed like an incredible task for Vegas to slow them down, and yet they were able to achieve that. And then I thought maybe, it's going to sound weird, but maybe their easiest series was against Dallas. Dallas kind of came into this. They didn't really have sharp goaltending. Oettinger was kind of not there. That offense didn't really, it didn't vibe for me either. So I think they definitely deserve to be here. They've gone through some serious competition to earn this spot. And it's also saying a lot that they're in the Stanley Cup Finals for the second time in 6 years, when we talk about Toronto doing just past the first round in 20. So this is a team that knows how to win. They know how to get things done. They've been here before, and now let's see if they can close out.
Let's go back to the beginning of the road for them. So, well, first of all, they met 2 times this season. I know you can't really take too much from a January 12th meeting, which Vegas won at home 4-2, and then on March 7th, Florida won at home 2-1. It was Bobrovsky versus Hill both times. So amazing to think that the Panthers got Hill both times, considering the goaltending carousel that Vegas had to deal with this year. So they've gotten 2 good looks at him. while Bobrovsky's regular season was inconsistent, when you look back at I watched the extended highlights from both of those games just to kind of refresh myself a little bit. And there were flashes of Bobrovsky playing in those games the way he's been playing in the playoffs. And the other thing that kind of jumped out at me in those two games was that the things that Dallas did well in the two games they won over Vegas was attacking the middle of the ice. And Florida was able to do that to varying degrees of success. Now we looking at the road here. Florida's gone 11-1 in their last 12 games, dating back to Game 5 against the Bruins. They won that series 4-3, 4-1, and 4-0 with the Leafs and the Hurricanes. They closed out their first two series on the road, and they are 8-1 away from Florida Live Arena. They are also 6-0 in overtime during the playoffs, and they've won 9 straight overtime playoff games dating back to 2021. On the Vegas side, they have yet to be pushed to the brink in the playoffs. They beat Winnipeg in 5, Edmonton and Dallas in 6. They closed out both of those series on the road. And, at the end of the day here, both, like you talked about, both teams have earned this to get to this point. I think we're going to be in for an excellent series. Two top players you have to talk about, at least outside of the crease. Jack Eichel leads Vegas with 18 points in 17 playoff games. Matthew Tkachuk, he's 21 points, 9 goals, and 12 assists in 16 playoff games. The Hart Trophy finalist here, he scored 4 goals in the 4-game sweep against Carolina, 2 of those in overtime. And of course, the series clincher with just under 5 seconds to go. So if Matthew Tkachuk has been the most impressive skater, who would you say is the second most impressive skater between these two teams in the playoffs? Start with you, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to say, right? You brought up like the two best players right there. I don't know for Vegas. For me, I don't know. And I had him on my fantasy team. So Mark Stone, for me, has been quite a playoff performer this year. And besides him, I lean towards Barbashev too, as well from Vegas. And you always got to be on the watch out for Barkov in Florida. He's a solid player, and that's a guy that they should outside of Tkachuk is someone you should be worried about if you're Vegas.
And you, Chris?
Yeah. I'm gonna give it to Jonathan Marchessault. I mean, it just seems like he's always when push comes to shove and you need a big goal, he's kind of right there to be able to deliver. We've seen him do it multiple times, whether it was against Edmonton, whether we saw it again in the last series against Dallas. He's just there, and he's a player who shoots the puck a ton. Like, we kind of forget that, but during the regular season, he had over like 200 shots easy, and he is the driving force of his line a little bit. He goes out there and he produces, and that gives Vegas the opportunity to move Stone around, kind of get him some free space. Mark Stone's not the fastest skater. He's not the quickest anymore. We know he's dealing with injuries, so it allows him to free up some ice. He doesn't have to play the big boys on the back end every shift and take a beating. So Marchessault can easily complete that line when you're playing with Jack Eichel, who can move the puck around as well as he does. He likes to have the puck on his stick. He had it the most of any player in the playoffs. He likes to dictate the play. He likes to enter the zone with it. So if you can find somebody who can finish, and Marchessault has done that throughout his career, to me, he just feels like the next guy who could get it done. Maybe not Justin Williams type Game 7, right? But he's definitely a player who you can count on when you need it.
Now, you can take a look at the series schedule that just came up on the screen there. We're going to talk plenty about Sergei Bobrovsky. Amazing to think that Alex Leon started the first 3 games of the playoffs for the Panthers before Bobo took over. He's 11-2 with a 2.21 goals against and a .935 save percentage. But on the other side with Vegas right now, Adin Hill, 7-3, 2.07 goals against, .937 save percentage, 9 starts in 11 games. This is his maiden playoff voyage since taking over for Brossoit. He was 4th on the depth chart coming into the season. How important has Adin Hill been to the Vegas over the past series and a half?
I mean, he's kind of just it's absolutely mind-boggling to think about how many goalies have played for Vegas this season, and it doesn't matter who starts, they haven't missed a beat. And the credit obviously goes to that team that plays in front of them, right? When you can just carousel whatever goalie you have and get them to play at a really high level, that's saying something about your team structure. That's saying a lot about your coaching. It's saying a lot about how that team plays in front of them night in and night out. To me, he is a good goalie in a great system, which makes him maybe a little bit better than he is. But look, throughout the course of hockey, we've seen, good goalies play on some elite hockey teams, and then they've looked just as good in ways that we saw last year where Darcy Kemper wasn't really that great, but his team in front of him was, so they carried him. And it's wild to think of the opposite happening this year. We look at two goalies who are just exceptionally good. Their teams, yes, they play good in front of them, but they also carry, a lot of that weight. I didn't think Adin Hill played poorly since coming in. I mean, the task of going up against McDavid and Draisaitl can make any goalie look terrible. And every night, I would say, against Dallas, he was the better goalie, with I think the exception of one game where he was a little bit off there, where he let in kind of those two little weak goals on Dellandrea. But outside of that, he has looked amazing, and I think that he is definitely a key to Vegas winning. If he's not on his game, Vegas has no chance.
And Anthony, we talked before about just how big Bobrovsky's played. What stood out to you about Bobrovsky we'll say over the last series and a half, same time frame as Adin Hill?
I think he just is right now living in this moment. Obviously, he's a Vezina Trophy winner. We know his pedigree, and this should not be a surprise to us of how well he can play. But, they went up against a Boston team that made history this season. So, they were tabbed to win win the Stanley Cup. And the way he played in that series, I think that just kind of, started the whole thing coming down. Not only did they win that series, but they won it being down 3-1. And they came back. And I think that getting that performance from him, I think if it affected the rest of the team, propelled them over Toronto, and then just a clean sweep of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Now, Bobo certainly got plenty of experience. One of the things we talk about at this time of the year is experience in the Stanley Cup Finals. That is one area that Vegas definitely has a little bit of an edge over Florida. Vegas has 6 guys remaining from their 2018 Cup run: William Karlsson, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, Shea Theodore, Braden McNabb, and William Carrier. Alec Martinez, Alex Pietrangelo, Ivan Barbashev, Chandler Stevenson all bring Stanley Cup experience as well. And heck, even Jonathan Quick, who is the 5th goalie on the depth chart, if they're all healthy, he's got experience too. I mean, Jonathan Quick was Sergei Bobrovsky in 2012 and 2014. Ask the Devils and ask the Rangers. You got a Devils fan and a Rangers fan sitting right here. So, he's seen it from the other side. Do you put a lot of stock in experience? When we talked about the Rangers Devils series in the first round, one of the things I like the Rangers early in that series, because the Devils really had no postseason experience. Rangers were loaded with it. And then the series kind of, once the Devils got their playoff legs, the real things got, we saw the real matchup there. How much stock do you guys put in Stanley Cup playoff experience becoming a factor? Florida has Eric Stahl and Mark Stahl, but that's really it.
I think that the experience is pretty big. I think with that Devils Rangers series, Schmidt didn't even really get as tested as you thought he would. I mean, the front lines for the Devils pretty much took care of the Rangers for the most part. And Schmidt got 20, 25 saves at most part. A lot of them were not really high target saves either. So that was like a tough series, to compare to with like a guy like Bobrovsky, who, he can stop some of those big saves, and, he'll have a good team in front of him. I think it's a little bit different for them going forward, but the experience obviously is big. I think the concern for me for Florida is all this time off, right? I mean, they're now going to have close to a week and a half off from when Vegas finished, and now the games are going to start Saturday. So they've had some time off, and that's more of the concern for me. I think the experience will come, and it's fine for them. I don't think that'll affect either team.
Chris, experience and delay for the Florida Panthers. What are your thoughts there?
I'm not going to put as much stock into the experience part. I think that's one of those things that coaches like to talk about, and media people, right? We talk about it's the same thing for players when we talk about, grits and compete and willing, those are all it's hard to measure those terms at this point. These teams have gotten here, and Florida had very little experience in anything, and they also knocked off the Boston Bruins. They made pretty quick work of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they made even quicker work of the Carolina Hurricanes. So the experience on a long term they may not have, but they've definitely gained experience in this playoff run as to how you need to get things done. When they needed to close things out, they showed up. It's rare that they look like a team that was lost, and they played exactly to their strengths, which was their goalie being hot, right? Matthew Tkachuk, he scored no goals in the Toronto series, and then he scored 4 against Carolina. So it's a testament to him getting things done in any way that he can. On the other side for Vegas, right? Yes, they have some players coming back. I think it's not going to hurt them. It can only help them. But if you're relying only on that experience, then you're just going to get lost. You know what needs to get done at this point. Everybody in all the dressing rooms. The hockey game is still the same. There's still 60 minutes. The goal is still the same. The way you play is still the same. The way you prepare. So nothing is really changing unless you get out of your mind and you think that it's a different game. In reality, it's not. For rest for Florida, I don't think it's an issue. At this point, right? Coaches will say it. The rest may even do them some good. Yes, you haven't played hockey in a minute, but you have also healed from those bumps and bruises. And you know those players have a ton of them at this point of the year. Every year we hear about players, Patrice Bergeron, one year playing with like broken ribs, cartilage missing, collapsed lung. And you're like, okay, well, so players at this stage, if you can get any type of rest and just heal those little bumps and bruises that players talk about having, it's a welcome. And that is the benefit of being able to make quick work of your opponent, right? You have a lot of time in between as well to get your game plan down, what you need to do, and kind of focus on your opponent. You'll get some practice in before, but there aren't many teams that are practicing right on off days during the playoffs. You're looking for rest. And this is what the Florida Panthers got. A lot of rest to help, right? The Stahl brothers, right? They're not, young anymore. They're not spring chicken. So the rest to those players and some of the veterans will definitely do them some good.
One other thing to talk about here with Vegas before we take a look at the series odds and make our predictions for that, and then we'll move on to game one. One thing that's being made a lot about is their high danger conversion rate, which was about 21% versus Winnipeg. It was just shy of 25% versus Edmonton, and then 25% versus Dallas. Now, the Connor Hellebuck maybe didn't have his best series in the first round, but still a top-notch goalie. Stuart Skinner, yeah, he will be better next year. He played well for them in stretches, but not a top goalie. We thought Dallas might, knock those high percentage numbers down, and they really didn't. So is Bobrovsky the antidote for this, or can they how do they continue to really, keep those, converting in those situations?
And it's crazy to think you brought up Dallas. I mean, I think at the beginning of the playoffs, people thought that Ottinger was going to be the best goalie out of everyone that was there, and it didn't work out in this series. He got manhandled by Vegas. So it's hard to even expect what we're going to expect from Bobrovsky. I mean, he could be able to handle this, or he might, fall prey to what Vegas did to Ottinger. So I don't know. It's this series is a real toss up for me. I'm even struggling trying to pick which team I think is going to win by the end of the show.
Yeah, it's definitely, you have to limit those high danger scoring chances. It's not, if, it's always a question of when, right? If you give a team too many opportunities to score goals, at some point they're going to do it, no matter who is in goal. It's, coaches talk about, not turning the puck over, right? We saw Vegas one game just basically give it away at will. They corrected that the next game. They ended up winning pretty easily. So if you can limit the amount of opportunities you give your opponents, whether that is high danger scoring chances, whether that's turning the puck over, we talk about power plays as well. I know the numbers are a little bit skewed here for Vegas. They had to go up against Edmonton, so their penalty kill doesn't look that great, but you have to be able to convert on the man advantage. You have to be able to defend when you take a penalty. Vegas has done a very good job of staying disciplined, so that's obviously played to their favor. And they're going to have to keep doing that in this series, because if you give Florida chances to, get to the dirty zone, Kachuk's going to spend his entire time in front of that net, and he's going to do exactly what he's paid to do. But you have to limit, their best shooters and and all the guys around that team to the outside, if you keep them away from the slot, you keep, Bobrovsky's eyes on the puck and clear things in front of him. It's not rocket science, but you have to do it. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when for good teams.
Special teams you mentioned there, the Golden Knights penalty kill, like you said, probably a deflated 63% right now because of that Edmonton series. The Panthers power play has been at 28% efficiency in the postseason. Vegas is at 18.5% power play efficiency in the postseason, which is a little bit lower than their regular season. The Florida penalty kill was struggled early on. They gave up 15 goals on 52 times shorthanded, but 11 of those came against the Bruins. So you got to keep that in mind there too. It's been a lot better against Toronto and was a lot better against Carolina. So let's take a look at the series odds here. You can see it up there on the screen. Florida in 4 is plus 1,200. Florida in 5 plus 750. Florida in 6 plus 450. Florida in 7 plus 560. Then on the other side, a Vegas sweep is at plus 1,000. The Golden Knights in 5 plus 470. 480 in game 6, and then 400 in game 7. So we've gone back and forth. We've talked plenty here about the matchups and all that. What do you think? What would you play, and what would be a good value play here? Let's start with you, Anthony.
I like Florida in 7 at the, what was that, 560? Can you bring that back up again? 560? I do like the Florida in 7 at 560. The value play for me probably would be, if I got to swap sides, Vegas in 6 at 480. I think that's quite possible too. So I like those. I like those two plays. If I had to do one for each team, it would be those two.
Chris?
For me, I mean, my heart is leading towards Florida. I just think they've accomplished too much to just not be good at this point, right? Like for everything to fall apart after so much that they've accomplished. I think Florida can take this in 6, right? Plus 450 is where I would lay my hard-earned money. If I was looking for some value, though, I would still stick on the Florida side, and I would pick Florida in 5, right? We saw them do this to Toronto. We saw this this to Carolina. They were very, very good at not taking their foot off the pedal when they are, when they know they can suffocate their opponents, and not giving them any life, and not giving them the chance of, the opportunity to believe that they can come back and win a series here. Florida in 5 at plus 750. It'll be a question of Florida just getting the job done and playing the way that they have to. And if Bobrovsky is just as good this series as he was since he took over, then I don't know how Vegas has a good offense, but I don't think they have enough guns to really just fill the net.
I agree. The value play would be Florida in 5 at plus 750, just because, I mean, if they're going to get it, I'm leaning Vegas, but I think if Florida's going to win, it has to be a short series. If they're going to win, they're going to just come out guns blazing against Vegas, and they're going to control the series, and that would be the value play. But for my pick, like you said, your hard-earned money, I'm leaning Vegas. I think Vegas in 6 is the way to go. I don't think they'll make quick work of them. Like you said, Florida's just done too much in the playoffs this year. It's not going to be a short series, I think, on either side. But I don't know if Florida will be able to push it to 7. They haven't been in a long series since the first round against Boston. And I think that's more of a tale of 2 series within a series than that being really like a back and forth kind of deal there. So I'm going to go Vegas in 6 plus 80. But if you want some value, like you said, Florida in 5 plus 750. So we'll move on now to the Conn Smythe odds, and those are courtesy of BetMGM. And don't forget, right now over at BetMGM, you can get $1,000 paid back in bonus bets. And if you don't win, you go to fantasyalarm.com, BetMGM, and take advantage of that right there. On the right side, your 2 favorites come from Florida. Sergei Bobrovsky at plus 200, Matthew Tkachuk at plus 300. Then the odds start to get a little bit long there for the Panthers with Verhaeghe and Barkov and company. On the left side with Vegas, Jack Eichel is the Golden Knights favorite at plus 400. Jonathan Marchessault and William Karlsson at plus 650. Aiden Hill at plus 1,000. And then as Anthony's guy, Mark Stone there at plus 1,500 before the odds start getting longer. For Florida, it's clearly going to be one or the other for the Conn Smythe, unless somebody emerges in this series and just sets the world on fire. Bobrovsky or Tkachuk right now, who's your Conn Smythe pick if you had to pick one?
For me, it's going to be Kachuk. I mean, he's got 21 points already. He leads the team in goals at 9. He leads the team in assists at 12. He's a far and away the best goal scorer right now for the team. It's not even close. I think Verhaeghe's second with 15 points. Besides that, it's Bob, right? But yeah, I'm going to go with Kachuk on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean the same way here. It's not that Bobrovsky hasn't been good. We know exactly what he's done, but if you remove Matthew Tkachuk from this Florida team, I mean, they don't even make it past. They don't even get to have an opportunity to upset the Bruins here. They don't get there. The timely goals that he scores, the way that he finds ways to be effective, even if he's not scoring goals. You see other teams always talk about Matthew Tkachuk and not getting into what he likes to do and not getting into the scrums and not engaging him. Like there's a lot of focus around one player, which is not something we see a lot of in hockey because it is a team sport. There are lots of players who can burn you, right? And outside of obviously McDavid and Draisaitl, where you have to watch those two. But a lot of coaches have talked about Matthew Tkachuk, what he brings and how he alone can influence a game. And he influenced every single game against Carolina. To me, he could win it even if Florida loses.
Wow.
Like we've seen, usually it'll go to a goalie, right? We've seen like the only one that comes to mind is when J.S. Jaguar won it when he was in Anaheim. Right, Devils ended up winning the Stanley Cup that year, and he won it as well. It's rare, but just looking at if he has a great series, Florida loses in 7, it's close and whatnot, I could still see it going to him. If they lose, nothing, not because Jack Eichel hasn't earned it, not because Jonathan Marchessault hasn't earned it either. I just think that he has been the definition of what that trophy represents.
Guys that have also won the Conn Smythe, but on the losing team previous to John Sebastian Jaguar in 2003 with the Ducks. Ron Hextall in 87 with the Flyers, Reggie Leach in 76 with the Flyers, Glenn Hall in 68 with the Blues, and Roger Crozier with the Red Wings in 66. So it's been a while, but I agree there. Like Chuck really has had that kind of postseason where he could win it from the losing side. The other story here too, NHL loves to give, if they can give it to an American-born player, they're going to try, and you don't have to try very hard with Chuck. And it's the perfect story. They trade for him, they bring him in, they give him the contract, they're putting the first move that Florida did was bringing in Bobrovsky on that big contract a few years ago. But the Tkachuk move was the signal that we're here, we want to go for it, and it's worked out for them. And it's too perfect. Bobrovsky could steal it from him if he kept it that's one goal or 2 goals less per game, and he still continues to play, lights out the way he did against Carolina. But the Tkachuk story is just too perfect. Now, when you get on the Vegas side of it, I think there's a lot more room for, there's more variety there in terms of picks. We could throw that back up on the screen. If you are picking a Conn Smythe winner from Vegas at this point, Anthony, who do you got?
I was thinking of, obviously Eichel, but I think Chris he's kind of pushed me towards Marchessault at 650. And then I even like as the value pick Barbashev at plus, was that plus 12,000?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I think that is a great a value pick as well. And like he was saying with Tkachuk winning it, because, Tkachuk has pretty much been Florida. With Vegas, there's been so many contributors here. You're looking at the points here: Eichel 18, Marchessault 17, Barbashev 15, Stone 15. Everything has been close. They've been getting from everywhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if Marchessault kind of inks this one out over Eichel. Although, I mean, what kind of a story would that tell if Eichel won it? I know, Adam, you and I have talked about this in the past with the Eichel, Connor McDavid, I guess, battle between the two of them as draft picks. That's a that would be a win, for him, not only to win the Stanley Cup, but to also win the Conn Smythe. That's a solid resume for himself.
I mean, to me, if he wins the Conn Smythe, not to say you can't erase history, but that reputation he had in Buffalo of being a malcontent, not a good teammate, all that disappears. Nobody cares about that anymore. And frankly, I don't think anybody cares about it anymore because he's gotten that change. Listen, sometimes guys just need a change of scenery and things blossom for them. And that is what happened with Eichel. I agree. Marchessault is probably, the best guy for Vegas, I think, in terms of a Conn Smyth favorite. But William Karlsson as a dark horse, he's been out there he's a strong defensive forward. He's going to see a lot of Matthew Tkachuk, especially in the games in Vegas. 14 points, 10 goals, 4 assists. If he can start pushing in some offense a little bit more too, and he does a good job on keeping, I'm not going to say shut down Matthew Tkachuk, but if he can keep him at bay and keep him respectable in terms of production, that's a guy you can think about too a little bit.
Yeah, those would have been my two picks as well, right? Looking at what William Karlsson of the defensive responsibilities that he has, but he's also contributing offensively, and that is, when you get your third line center who can start to contribute like he does, you're going to turn out and be pretty in a good spot. They usually flip him and Chandler Stevenson, and Stevenson can play a little bit of everywhere, but to me, in my book, they want to give Chandler Stevenson maybe a little bit more offense, play a little bit with Stone, kind of move the puck around. And William Karlsson is the guy who they count on to be responsible defensively and also go out there and produce points. The same thing for Jack Eichel, right? If you had on the betting card Eichel winning a Stanley Cup and a Conn Smyth before Connor McDavid, I would have said that's crazy. But here he is, and that's exactly it. He has looked really good. You haven't heard anything about Jack Eichel since showing up in Vegas. You haven't heard about all the the unhappiness and this and not willing to do. I think he wanted out of Buffalo. I think that was pretty obvious at one point when he was going through the procedure of trying to get the neck surgery that he wanted, and the team saying no. And he showed up here. He's wanting to be here. He's wanting to compete. He makes his line mates better, right? That's always a good sign when you talk about an elite forward, not just making yourself good, but there's a reason the guys who are playing with him are having so much success as well, even though he's not popping goals and filling the net. So to me, I think he is the runner, and the only person who can steal it from him, it would be Marchessault if he goes on this tear of just finishing everything that Jack Eichel feeds him.
All right, so we've got our Conn Smyth picks. Let's recap here our Stanley Cup Final picks. I'm going Vegas in 6. I'm very impressed with what Florida has done, and I'm not trying to take anything away from them. I don't think the momentum, I'll talk a little bit about how I think the momentum affects them in game 1, but not over a series in a second. But Vegas is they're dominating at even strength. They don't really have to rely on their power play all that much. Of the 62 goals they scored, 49 have come 5-on-5, and then another 2 4-on-4. So even strength is what they're doing best right now. And like you said earlier, if they stay out of the box, which they've been able to do, I think they've got a strong chance. And they've been consistent. Not to say Florida has gotten bounces, but Florida has had, they've had a lot of close calls with these overtimes and stuff like that, and they found a way and come through. But Vegas, to me, has just had that consistent path of they were the second seed in the West, top seed in the Pacific. They took care of business, 5 games against Winnipeg. They got a little bit of a test from Edmonton. The better team prevailed. They pretty much, in Dallas also gave them a little bit of a fight. I just think they've had a nice consistent path where Florida has been just setting the world on fire and getting everything is going their way right now. And I think at some point that does have to cool off a little bit. So I got Vegas in 6.
I'm going to go Florida in 7. I think the Cinderella story, gets its happy ending. I mean, look at what they've done. They got in within the last couple days of the season to get into the playoffs, and they beat Boston. Like I said, coming back from 3-1, they took care of business against Toronto, completely, finished off in 4 games the Carolina Hurricanes, and for them to, get this in and finish off Vegas, I think that's the way to go. One thing that you mentioned earlier, Adam, was I think it was overtime wins. They are what again? Were they 8-0, 9-0?
So let's see here. Let me go back to my notes. They are 6-0 in the 2023 playoffs and 9 straight overtime wins going back to 2021.
I mean, mentally, that has to play some kind of part. If they can, if these games are tied and they somehow get into overtime, I think that mental aspect for them has to play a huge part to know that they can feel confident enough to get get a win in overtime since they have not lost within the last 2 playoff appearances. I think that's pretty huge. A little side note for Florida. So I have Florida in 7. I think it's going to be a good series. I actually had Florida in 7 against Carolina because I thought that was a good matchup, and it ended up being a sweep. So I hope we at least get 7 here.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I'll go with Florida in 6. I know there's one thing society will never be able to agree on, and that is religious beliefs. But for me, the hockey gods here have just decided that the Florida Panthers are, the script has already been written. At least that's how I look at it. You look at like you said, you look at all these close calls, and I feel like it's ironic that a cat has 9 lives, and I think the Panthers have gone through at least 7 to get here. They've played through so many different things, overtime goals being called back and just bounces. And you look at Tkachuk finishing. Like if that first game against Carolina and that 4 OT goes the other way, maybe this, that series is a whole different thing. But you walk out of Carolina on the road, 2 overtimes wins, Tkachuk just flying out of the rink wanting to get out of Carolina. There's so many things that they have done well. I don't think it's going to correct itself. Like, I don't think it's going to balance out. I think this team knows that they can win. They feel that they are the better team. They know that they're the underdog in every series because they were the 8th team. And I think they've played that really well. And I think even they believe coming into this series that they are an underdog. And I just look at how they've gone through this. They're not going to score a whole bunch of goals, right? They're not going to go out there looking to score 5-6. It's not how this team is built. It might take a while for them. So they might be a team that's very okay with playing that patient style of hockey and saying, hey, when we get our chances, we're going to take advantage of them. We're just got to put them in the net. And to me, I think they're going to need to win games on the road. They've proven that they can do that the entire playoffs. So who says that they can't go into, the Fortress in Vegas and come out with 2 wins, and then all you got to do is finish business on home ice, and there you go. The cup returns to Florida again.
I can only imagine what Vegas is going to have. The first year they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. And if you ever go to a Vegas game in general, just the pregame ceremony for a November regular season game against Winnipeg.
Yes.
Fantastic. So what they're going to do for the Stanley Cup this year, the first year I feel like just snuck up on everybody, but I'm looking forward to that. Now, speaking of the first game 1, here's some odds, what we're looking at here on the money line, courtesy of BetMGM. Florida's plus 115, Vegas minus 135. If you're feeling frisky on the puck line, Florida plus a puck and a half is minus 250, Vegas minus a puck and a half plus 190. And the over 5.5, under 5.5 for this series. Over 5.5 for game 1 is minus 115, and under 5.5 is minus 105. So series predictions don't necessarily mean game 1 predictions. So where are we leaning game 1? If you pick over, and where you're leaning there.
I'm going to go Vegas for game 1. I think that having that rest may affect Florida at least this first game, and let them get their feet wet a little bit. So I'm going to take Vegas for game 1 just because they have that a little more. I don't know, not a break, but they just played a little bit more leading up to this first game.
They've played this week versus Florida, who hasn't played since the middle of last week. So
yeah, I'm not worried about the rest. It's just not. It's not something I'm worried about because this is such a good team, and the rest to me can only do them some good. They're going into this series. They know what they're expecting. If anything, they'll come out being fresh. I don't think this is a team that's going to come out flat. They have to survive the first 10 minutes because that's when the onslaught's going to come and the opposing team is going to push and they're going to try to get it. And they've done it. They've done it successfully. We've seen them go on the road and win hockey games. I'm actually going to go just completely off the board here because I think that Florida could be a small favorite based on the way that they're playing. I would take the alternate puck line. I'd go Florida minus 1.5, a plus 230. It may end with a empty net goal, which I expect this game to be close. So if Florida has a slight lead at the third period, Cassie's not going to wait until the final 2 minutes to pull his goalie. He might say, hey, if we lose by 1 or we lose by 4, we still lose. So pull that goalie early, and then you're just rooting. You're staying up, us on the East Coast, to the wee hours of the morning, rooting for an empty net goal. That's just the life that we've chosen. But that's how if I'm gonna try to get the maximum amount of value here, like if Florida loses, okay, they lose. I lost both ways, but I would take the alternate puck line, the Florida minus 1.5.
The first overtime game between Carolina and Florida, I moved to the West Coast a few years ago, but that game was like a throwback to watching a game on the East Coast, because I got to stay up just as late watching the game as I was on the East Coast. Sorry for you guys though on the East Coast. For me, I think game one, I know I got Vegas winning the series. I do think the layoff maybe affects the Panthers for like the first couple of shifts, but not too long. I think Florida's going to jump them in game one. I don't know if I'm ready to go puck line or alternate puck line, but I think Florida, plus money at 115 with the way they're playing. I think they do want to come out and make some noise. I think they do want to come out and make a statement. So I'm going to go Florida here plus 115. More of a gut feeling in game one. I do like the under though. I think both teams are going to feel each other out. So I would definitely lean under the 5.5 there for game one of this series. So just to wrap things up here before we say goodbye, one thing I found interesting from Christopher Cipollini, who is the sports trader at BetMGM, he actually said that, quote, the book prefers the Panthers winning, but we're not sweating either outcome. Florida single-handedly cleared out a majority of our liability, referring to the Bruins and the Maple Leafs. The book loves the Panthers this year. It would be the best outcome in Stanley Cup futures in BetMGM history if Florida won. Small market team in a state where the book can't take bets is ideal. So even though when you go to Vegas now and it's a Vegas Golden Knights game day, you'll have, the pit bosses, the card dealers, the waitresses are all decked out. Vegas Golden Knights shirts, jerseys, the whole 9 yards. But, the people that employ them are not rooting for Vegas, which I find pretty funny.
Vegas never lies, right? So there you go. The script is written.
Well, so that'll do it for our very first debut edition of Bettor Hockey Now. Now, if you want to check out some of Christopher's work, he's going to be at fantasyalarm.com. You can get the all-pro access to Fantasy Alarm for the award-winning DFS playbook. It covers 10 different sports. You're not thinking about fantasy football right now, but you're going to be thinking about it pretty soon here. Christopher's going to have daily articles up there. On the Bettor Sports Network side of things, Mr. Jared Moore over at Twitter at Bettor Network. He puts out picks every NHL game day. Moose and Keith in the mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern time. They're talking hockey. Kyle Elfrink with the 5-pack at noon Eastern. He's also covering hockey. And then Bettor Sports Betting at 4 o'clock Eastern every day. Dan Servadidio and other Fantasy Alarm analysts, depending upon who it is each day, they're going to talk Stanley Cup Finals each time there's a game too. So plenty of places here on the Bettor Sports Network and Fantasy Alarm for you guys to get your Stanley Cup playoff coverage. So that'll do it for the debut edition of Bettor Hockey Now on the Bettor Sports Network. For Christopher Morais and Anthony Rivera, I'm Adam Bernard. Happy puck watching, happy Stanley Cup, and enjoy yourselves.
Bettor Hockey Now is on the Bettor Sports Network.